Hello and welcome to The Habit Architect. Great to have you here today. It is episode 2 of season 3. So if you missed it, we had our season changed over, and season 3 started last week with Jared Webb, who was talking about understanding signals and leaning that into how you support your customers, how you grow your company, and things like that. It was a great episode, and we're really excited if you go back and watch that. Just a reminder, please do like, share all the good stuff you do for our podcast. We appreciate any and all of that as we try to continue to promote and find new audiences. It relies on you. Don't forget to ask questions today live if you want to. Just if you're on LinkedIn, you can just ask it through the comment section. If you're on YouTube, the same thing. And we take all questions live. Our guest today is Joey, and he's going to introduce himself because I don't want to misjudge some of his concepts, but he is a values expert. And as you guys know, in the book that I wrote and things we talk about, we had a conversation with Meg not too long ago about values and the importance of values. If you're going to stick to things, if you're going to create a new habit, if it's not tied to a value, it probably won't stick. And Joey's an expert in this, and we're going to talk about that more. He has something that he's going to talk about called the alignment engine, which I went through last night. It's a great way to kind of check your values, if you will, and certain growth solutions. So I'm going to let him do a full introduction. Why don't we bring Joey on board? While we're doing that, while he's coming from backstage, again, just do like, and we appreciate Time Bandit. Do look for that priority matrix if you haven't downloaded that yet. Get on that. So I think we're getting there. He is. Hey, Joey, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's fantastic because this is a topic that I've talked about a lot, and I touch parts of it, but I'm really looking forward to going deep. And when people are watching The Habit Architect, and especially the previous seasons, it was about building habits, getting prioritization right. And I think if you don't get value, if it's not tied to a value, it all falls apart. So I'm looking forward to the deep dive here.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the way I look at it is like we have basically two choices. We're either operating from our values or operating from some doubt or fear. And I hadn't really put it together, but when you talk about Time Bandit, operating from your doubts and fears totally sucks up your time. And when you operate from your values, it just allows you, you're not always perfect, but it allows you to save so much time. You're so less stressed. So I think that Time Bandit part, I hadn't pieced that together, but it's 100%. Your values are like, I don't know, they're like the Lone Ranger to the Time Bandit.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, why don't we start by you just introducing yourself? How did you get here? And I mentioned certain growth solutions, but I'm sure you can do justice to it better than I did.
Yeah, so my name is Joey Chandler, and I'm the founder of Certain Growth Solutions, and we help entrepreneurs and founders and business owners basically clarify their values and make greater use of them so they can spend less time dealing with their doubts, their fears, their worries, and various blocks. And what I have found is that every business owner has a goal, whether it be a long-term goal to grow their business or a short-term goal to, get out a podcast or do sales. And as soon as you think of a goal, there's going to be some doubt or fear. I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes. This won't work out. I don't have enough hair, whatever it is. And they're not reasonable. They're not logical. They are very real to us.
Yeah.
And what I found is rather than trying to fight through them and power through them and rah, that sort of thing, you can acknowledge them, say, hey, I feel like I suck today or whatever it is. And then you can say, what do my values say to do? And your values will always give you aligned action. They'll give you something actionable and will help you move forward. And it just saves so much time and energy.
Yeah, I like that. It's a categorization and gets you reset. But so values is an overused word, unfortunately. And anytime politicians start using it, it becomes really a homogenized word, unfortunately, because you hear people throw out, we do family values and all these values. But what would you say is the definition of values as an individual?
Yeah, to me, your values represent who you are at your core, and they really represent who you are at your very best. Like my values are connection, curiosity, and fun. And when I'm being my best, I'm bringing aspects of those to my life. And I'm not 100% perfect at it. I don't think any of us are in our values, but once you get clear on them, and I think it's important that we get them down to 3. That's because 3 are just easier to remember.
Yeah.
And when you're having trouble or when you want to be at your best, you can say, okay, hey, what's going on here? What do my values say to do? And it just gives you a system to just keep bringing your best self forward. Yeah. Because again, to me, it comes down to 2 things. We're either operating off of some doubt or fear,
Yeah.
or we're operating off our values. There's not a lot in between. And when you and the problem is that our values are more powerful than our fears, absolutely, but our fears are louder than our
Yeah.
values. You
Yeah.
know,
I get
they're the ones screaming at you. And that's
Yep.
in the part that I really started to see. I used to be someone who's like, okay, I gotta get rid of my fears. Like there's something wrong with me because
Yeah.
I question myself. I have imposter syndrome. But in this doing this work and doing research just in the brain, our amygdala, the lizard part of our brain, our fears are just natural parts of our life. They are as foundational to our life as our joy and our happiness. So
Yeah.
we can't push them away. So
Yeah.
we can do is acknowledge them. Hey, I feel like the fear in my head today is I suck. I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Put you aside. What do values say to do? And go on.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting because I've done some workshops where people go through a hierarchy of values exercise. And what strikes me with that always is they pick let's just say the top three: family, health, and wealth, right? But those aren't really values; those are categories, right? Or and so, but what you're talking about are you mentioned yours, curiosity and fun. I didn't hear the first one, but you mentioned three that aren't talking about a big category of health, right? It's who you are, and there's a differentiation there. I think that it's worth talking a little bit about.
Yeah, I think the health, wealth, and relationships, those are essentially goals.
Yeah,
I want to have an X number of dollars. I want to have a certain type of relationship. I want, to look a certain way and weigh a certain thing. Those are goals, super important. But and the reason but they aren't who you are. What
yeah,
happens is if you think about if your values, and I don't know where our values come from. It could be a spirit, a soul, a God, an energy. It could be just way through
yeah,
evolution. I don't debate, where they come from. I just know that we had them when we were young.
yeah,
So a lot of people will pick words like integrity or authenticity, something that's like kind of like that
yeah.
sounds great. But I know when you were 10, 12, 14 years old, you weren't thinking of those things at all.
Right.
And
It's true. Yeah,
and
exactly.
so we want language that lands true to you, like in your heart and your gut, rather than our heads.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And so when you're working with these entrepreneurs, how I mean, do you find that they're misaligned with that concept of values? I mean, what walk me through just hey, you get a new customer that feels like they're out of touch. So what transforms?
Yeah. So the first thing we do is we identify their values, and you went through the process. We get three values, and it's fun. It only takes about three questions to do,
Yeah,
and then we really it's the exact same process. We use these six questions, which I call the alignment engine, and essentially we're saying, hey, what's the goal that you have? I want to grow my business. I want to increase sales. I want whatever their goal is, and then we ask, what's the fear that comes up regarding that goal?
yeah,
And that will, we will just acknowledge that. And then we say, what do your values say to do? And we explore that question of what do your values say to do is a brainstorming exercise.
yeah,
So let's say I want to increase my sales. And I would say, okay, how can I bring some connection, some creativity,
yeah.
connection, curiosity, and fun to that? And the way I look at core values is they're kind of like our primary colors.
Uh,
With primary colors,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
three colors, but they create the entire spectrum of the what we see.
yeah.
And your values are the same way. So maybe you're not bringing 100% curiosity, but you're bringing 50% and 25% connection and 25% fun, and that will create something that you need in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great way of looking at it. And actually, I did go through your alignment thing, and I did it wrong because I was thinking what people think of me versus what I really want. My
Oh,
values. So I'm
yeah,
going
yeah.
to go back and do it again.
Okay,
But I was
perfect.
thinking, what I was thinking at that moment when you feel good, joy, what is happening, and I was thinking what people were thinking, not what I was thinking. Right.
Yeah.
So I'll go back through it. I promise I'll do it. Maybe we can redo another session too later. But you talk about, and I think this is big for entrepreneurs and any business leader, anybody that's in a leadership role, the 3 a.m. problem. I'd love to dig into that perspective from you.
Yeah. Yeah. This was one that came up last basically beginning part of this year. You wake up, you're a business owner, you wake up and all of a sudden things are racing through your brain. Like, I got to do this. And they're generally thoughts that you don't know how to resolve. Like our brains are always trying to solve something. And I think what happens is that we have this problem. How do I increase my sales? And we just don't know how to do it. I mean, if we knew
Yeah.
how to do it, we wouldn't be worried about it, right? So our brain wakes up at 3 and it starts racing around. It starts just doing whatever,
Yeah.
whatever our brains do. Um, and a while back, I woke up, I was thinking of something and I didn't know what it was. But I went through these 6 questions, and I'll share the questions with you. And it was one of those things. I was like laying in bed, like I'm like, I don't know if this will work, but I know this helps bring certainty in my life. So I'm just
Yeah.
gonna give it a try. This was really just so the first question I always ask is, what can I celebrate about yesterday? So I was laying in bed and I was like, what can I celebrate? And honestly, I don't remember what it was, but
Yeah.
let's say I did something. And then we asked, what did you learn from that? And that would give me a lesson. And you ask those 2 questions because celebration triggers dopamine in your brain, and what you learn from that gives you a sense of accomplishment and puts you into a
Yeah.
growth mindset.
Yeah.
Then you ask, "What's my goal?" And at the time, I'm sure I was thinking about sales or trying to grow my business, and so
Yeah.
that was my goal. What's the fear? And at the moment, at that time it was usually like, I suck. There's nothing I can do. This isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Those sorts of thoughts. And then what do my values say to do? And I, connection, curiosity, fun, and went through, and then it gave me something. And what happened was, is I did that for a couple of days. I just started doing that. And what I found is initially it would allow me to fall back to sleep because my brain would then have an answer.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, I was like, okay, I can do that thing, and let me go. I can do that in the morning, and my brain would fall asleep, and I would get back to sleep. And then the most interesting thing is I found myself sleeping through the night. I
Yeah.
would go to bed at 10 or 11. I started waking up at 5 or 6, which is, for me, kind of a full night's sleep.
Yeah.
And I was shocked because I was like, wait a minute, just a couple of days ago, I was waking up at 3. And I think what was happening is when your brain knows that you have a system to resolve something, it doesn't get worried. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to know the answer. It just has to know that you can figure out the answer. And
Yeah.
by doing those questions over and over again, it just allows your brain to relax.
Yeah.
And when your
Yeah.
brain can relax, it will,
That's interesting.
it will get
And
grounded
it,
and you can move on.
and it's those fear things in our mind, right? That's really keeping us up at night. That you talked about earlier. It's maybe even uncalled for fear, but it's where our brain is going, well, what about this? What about this? And oh my goodness, what are we going to do here? And it just kind of breaks us up. So mine is not waking up at 3. It's actually getting to sleep because I sometimes I have to get up and do a meditation or Tai Chi or something just to say, okay, get my mind in a different place. But I really like what you did because you resolved it through your questions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. Yeah.
And the fun part is that you can practice this in what I call safe areas of life. Like it might be difficult to do this. If you got a big problem in your mind and you can't get to sleep, it might be difficult if this is the very first time you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
just takes a little practice, but you can do it. You're like, hey, I want to have a great day. I want to do a great podcast. Let me go through the questions. Let me just see what shows up. And
Yeah.
you can practice it in the safe areas. Then under times of stress, like 3 a.m. or going to sleep, you're like, you can trust yourself more. You go through the process
Yeah.
and you'll get more grounded in your values. They'll tell you what to do and you'll be able to get back to sleep or at least come up with a plan.
Yeah. And again, that would probably work with alignment of your projects too, because so many people today, because of all the media and everything that hits us, we have more ideas than we have capacity to deliver on those ideas, right? And particularly for an entrepreneur, ideas are good, but if it changes your focus every 2 or 3 days, then you're gonna waver off the path, right? So you could also use that exercise to make sure that you're tying it back to the values to stay focused on. And most of the time, if you build a product or system or whatever it is that you're selling, you're probably don't give up on it too quickly, is probably one of the biggest things that entrepreneurs do, right?
Absolutely. Any good project, anything worthwhile, you're going to bump up against a doubt or fear at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just are like, Taylor Swift talks about, having fears before going on stage. If anyone should have no fears, it should be her.
Right.
But, she talks about fears. Same thing. Every performer has, that talks about that they're going to show up. So rather than trying to pretend that they won't or somehow make it feel like you're, I'm a good leader because I don't have any fear, it's like, no, you're human. You're going to have fears. Let's acknowledge those fears and move on. And a lot of things like procrastination, chasing after the shiny object, imposter syndrome, uh, there's anxiety that is clinical anxiety. And that's a whole different, we're not talking
Yeah.
about that, but that general anxiousness that
Yeah.
is, quote, normal anxiousness. All of those are based on you're spending more energy focused on a fear or a doubt rather
Yeah.
than your values.
Yeah.
And so if someone's bouncing all around, I actually had a client who, this was a guy who he ran a PR agency, and he would go to a workshop or read a book. And this guy, like, from day one, he would implement it. It would just be like boom, 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 boom. And it was awesome.
Yeah.
But there was this thing, he would implement it. And then after like a week or two, something wouldn't work right. It just would be off.
Yeah.
And then he'd read another book or do another workshop, and he would implement it. Awesome.
Yeah.
But again, it was this weird thing because he was really progressing. Like, you never could argue with his progression, but the end result wasn't working.
Right.
And so we looked at this and we kept exploring his values, which were love, harmony, and fun. And at a certain point, he's like, I got it. And what he realized is that he wasn't trusting himself. He wasn't loving himself, essentially. He was looking for wisdom from somebody, from other people. And because he was skilled and because he was talented, he would execute.
Yeah.
But what he started doing is, how can I create my business that has love, harmony, and fun for me, my clients, and my staff? And he just started exploring what did it take. And one of his great moments, he had two awesome moments. One was when he's like, I've brought all of my technology in-house. We now manage the sales process. We now know our outreach. Like, he was so happy because it was him.
Yes, it's his voice. And
it was his voice, his everything. And he actually started, he now tells clients, if I don't think we're going to have love, harmony, and fun together, I'll say thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And that's, I like what you assessed is, it was his self-love. He didn't have the trust in himself that he needed to kind of carry through with what his values represent. That's fantastic. Is that what the alignment engine is all about? Because that was my next question. And I think you kind of tell us about the alignment engine.
Yeah. So the alignment engine really came out of my experience of burning out. About 4 years ago, I burnt out really bad, and a bit of a longer story, but I ultimately started asking myself, what do my values say to do each day? Yeah. So how can I bring a little connection, curiosity, and fun? And I would just ask myself, what can I do? And when I burnt out, it was, I could get up, I could go to the bathroom, I could drink water and get back into bed, because that's all I could do. Yeah. But I eventually recovered, and I started exploring, like, how did I do that? Because I didn't do any yoga, I didn't do any meditation, I didn't do any of the anti-burnout things that you would normally associate with a burnout recovery program. And what I realized, it was, one, knowing your values. That's one thing. But it was really that question of, how can I use them today, that gave me the process of every day of using it. And that's what made the difference. Not knowing my values, that helped, but it was the implementation of my values that made the difference. And so then I went to work. I was like, how can I do this every day? Because if I can bring my values every day, I can recover from burnout, I can prevent burnout, and I can get more done. Yep. And it took me many, this was not a one time, this is not a, wake up on a Sunday and have it all figured out by Monday thing. This was multiple years of, essentially trying and retrying. But I came up with these 6 questions. Yeah. The first question is always, what can you celebrate about yesterday? And then the second is, what can you learn from it? That triggers the dopamine and puts you in a growth mindset. That primes the pump, so to speak. Yep. Then you ask, what is the goal that you have? This could be a business goal, it could be a personal goal, it can be a fitness goal, but you just want to be like clear, and that gives you direction and focus. Yeah. Then as soon as you set the goal, it's, hey, what fear comes up? Because we want to acknowledge those fears, because they're going to be louder than our values. And then the 5th question is, what do our values say to do? And this is where having 3 values is really helpful, because it's just easy to remember them. You could explore, you can do a bit of brainstorming. And then after you do that, the 6th question is, from that list of ideas, what's one action I can take today? Yep. And when you take that when you identify something that you can do, that will trigger your intrinsic motivation. So not only do you have more clarity in what it is to do to move yourself forward in your project, you have the confidence and energy that you'll actually do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I like to just do the first thing. I teach that a lot, especially with procrastination. You don't have to do the whole project. Just do one thing, and what happens then is mentally you start going, okay, yeah, I can do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and before you know it, the project's where it needs to be, right? And that's such an important concept that you just mentioned there. The burnout factor, though, that's happened to a lot of people. It's happened, and usually what the instruction is get balance. And I've always found that to be a hard word to put my head around, because balance means everything's in equal weight, right? And it's just, how do you do that, right?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that have done a lot of great work on burnout. And so I don't want to dismiss any of their work, but a lot of the anti-burnout prevention programs and burnout recovery programs, they're exhausting.
Yeah.
They're like, like figure out balance and then go to yoga, do yoga 3 days a week and do meditation this, and then journal this and set boundaries. Like, if you could do all those things, you would have done them. Yeah. And one thing that burning out really taught me as a coach is that if I can't hear what you're saying, I can't do it. Yeah. And so I really worked on like those 6 questions. Those are the absolute minimum that you need to consistently bring your values to a situation. So I do everything I can. And I just think, like, can I hear, like, if someone said you need to have more balance in your life. When I was laying in bed and I had nothing, I'd be like, screw you. Like, what balance is just like spreading my legs out on the, on the bed. That's all I can do. And so, but this is ultimately what it comes down to me, is a very simple thing. It is, listen, I can't say it's impossible, because there's always some scenario where it might happen, but it is extremely difficult to burn out if you're taking actions that align with your values.
Yeah.
I mean, and you may have days where you're tired. You may have days where you're exhausted. You may have days where you're frustrated, for sure. But that ongoing, consistent, pervasive sense of exhaustion and frustration and overwhelm and hopelessness, that really drives burnout. That can't happen when you're operating off your values and you have a system to do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great message. I'm glad you brought that up. And I kind of want to talk about the flip side of that too, because, and I'll tell you my personal experience. I had some health issues and I kind of let myself go. And then I had a hip replacement, which I shouldn't have had to do that in my 50s. And then I had a bicycle accident, broke my collarbone in a lot of places. And so there were a lot of things. And I gave myself the excuse that, I'm not as healthy as I should be because of all these things. But then last year, and I'll tell you a success story. Last year, I decided, I got back from a trip from France with Catherine. And I said, I don't like how I feel. And I got a new digital scale, and it showed me that my metabolic age was actually 7 years older than I was. Right. And I was thinking, how can this be? I just didn't see myself that way. And so what really worked for me to get healthier was not lose weight, or run a marathon. It was, I don't want to be that old. Today I'll get that old, but when I get that old, I want to be that age. And when I'm in this age, I need to be this age. And today I got on that same scale, and I'm 2 years, metabolic age is 2 years younger than I actually am. So feel really good. But what I did is I tied a value to it, and it wasn't an obscure external value. It was, I want to be healthy. I want to be my age, kind of thing. And I resonate with what you're saying. And I don't know if you see that too, where it's not about preventing something. It's about doing something kind of, for me, spectacular. Right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Your values can work on both ends of like when you're totally exhausted and burnt out, and when you're trying to raise your game. Yeah. I'm guessing you probably looked better than many people in shape like you, but for you weren't. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to raise my game, X percentage. And this is the fun part. The Lyman engine is not only a way that you can use to get going and succeed, but it also works as a recovery tool, because we all have off days, off weeks, heck, even off months, right? We all have that. And the really interesting part is, once you get those questions, you kind of memorize them, you have them part of your life. You have a bad week, it happens. You eat whatever you eat, you do whatever you do. Like you can take a deep breath. What can I celebrate about yesterday? What did I learn from it? What's my goal? My goal is to get back into doing whatever it is you're doing. And you go through the process, and there's no shame, there's no guilt. In fact, there are things that you will learn from recovering, from failing and then recovering, that you wouldn't have learned had you been perfect at it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you have an example of that? Maybe one of your customers?
Um, let me see here. I'm trying to think of uh, yeah, so I had a guy who was he went through a tough divorce, and he turned to TikTok, and TikTok really applauded him for his anger.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it just went, it just went, uh, and he got a ton of following, and all these people that were, yeah, you're right, just all sorts of stuff.
yeah,
And he
yeah.
came to me. He's like, I love the attention. I love the business aspect of this, but this is, I'm
It doesn't
not, this is
align.
not me. This is not
Yeah,
me. And he's like, I didn't know what to do. And so we went through his values, and his values were contribution, creativity, and connection. And, uh, and we just started just exploring them, like, how can you do this? And then he had to make a choice. Like, he
yeah,
really did have to. It was a tough choice, because he had, he was growing a business based off of this
yeah.
influx
Anger,
of
yeah,
followers, and he had to make a choice. He said, like, I'm either going to live true to my values, or I'm going to live true to this. I'm going to feed that machine. And
yeah,
it took him a while. Like, this was not like, again, this was not like a one day sort of thing.
yeah,
He
sure.
he we took some time, and he went, and he's like, I'm going to make this choice, and he's like, I'm going to live true to my values. And then over the next few months, he would, I would watch the videos that he did on TikTok, and he would do some, that were
Yeah, yeah,
contribution, and then he'd be like, "Mother," he would fall back into it, and we'd have to laugh about it. We'd take a deep
sure.
breath. Okay,
Yeah,
let's go back. And then recently, he was so happy because his boys came to him, and they're like, "Dad, mom's dating somebody, and she doesn't want us to tell you about it." Like,
yeah,
and you're happy that your kid is telling you, being
yeah,
honest with
exactly.
you, and it's kind of fun, it's kind of cute.
Yeah,
But he was also like, he went through a bunch of stuff.
yeah,
But instead of that anger, he took it, and he just was honest about it. He did a video on just what that experience was like for him, and it turned
yeah.
out to be one of his most impactful videos.
Oh,
And
that's great.
and that was just like, it was just like baby step, baby step, baby step. Not, there was no like single epiphany moment. It was just like
Yeah.
doing the work.
And that's important, right? People that may be listening and think about this, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a consistency that's matter. I always say, we're not going for perfection. We're going for consistency here, right? And
Yeah.
that's that story life. So let's talk about technology a bit. So technology in that case, you probably gave him a good outlet, but he ultimately realized it wasn't his values. AI is upon us now, and I know you have a perspective on AI and how it aligns or doesn't align and how you can use it. So do you want to share some of that?
Yeah. So if you spend any time on LinkedIn right now, or you spend any time talking to people who are trying to figure out what's next in AI, because clearly it's a force that's going to be with us for, quite a while.
Yeah.
And the question is, how do you bridge the AI human divide? Because right now there's a lot of people who are just like, they're creating papers, they're creating content, they're creating books, they're creating everything, and it's really not them creating, it's just the AI is just spewing out all sorts of things. And there's also a ton of people who are um, exhausted and overwhelmed by what's possible out of this, and they're also feeling way behind. They're like, it's too late for me, and AI is bringing up a ton of fears.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of talk like, I am literally training AI to take my job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it'd be really hard to operate in that. I think it's fair to say it'd be really hard to operate in that environment.
Right.
And so there's lots of people wondering, like, how do we do this? And what I found, and I did this just kind of naturally, is you take your core values and you put them in the custom instructions of your AI of choice.
Yeah.
So I use Claude and Gemini mostly,
Yeah.
and so they have, like, I say, my values are connection, curiosity, and fun. I also say this is what they mean to me.
Yeah.
I give them little details. I say, when I'm struggling, use the 6 questions, the Lyman engine. And what ends up happening is that Claude is now a reflection of me. I'm
Yeah.
not getting overwhelmed by, because Claude
Yep.
can, you ask Claude, like, how do I do a marketing plan? It
Yeah.
can give you, it can give
Yeah.
you a million different answers, all of which are good,
Yeah.
or, many are good.
Yeah.
But if they don't align with your values, you're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
or it's going to take a lot more work.
Or
But
it's
if
going
you
to sound
say,
unnatural, right?
yeah, it
It's going to
won't
not
feel
sound
natural.
like you.
It
Yeah.
won't feel like you. But if you say, hey, my values are connection, curiosity, and fun, how do I do, whatever? And then it gives you ideas. And the coolest thing is that you start to see ideas about different things using your values. So it
Yeah.
actually helps you grow. It
Yeah.
helps you expand your understanding of what's possible with like for me, with curiosity or connection in a way that I wouldn't have got by myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
And that's
and
great. I mean, I use the same footprint you do, Claude and Gemini, but I've given it instructions, but I haven't given it that level. And that's a great takeaway for me, is that let's go and inspect what I've instructed it to do. Is it really my values or something I thought should be?
it's something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it becomes this really interesting, powerful tool.
Yeah.
And and then it bridges that gap, because then the AI becomes a reflection of who you are rather than you essentially being a prompter for it.
Yeah. I want to go back to one thing you said there, though, that I think is interesting, because it is a fear. Somebody's sitting there doing something, feeding documents into AI, and they're thinking to themselves, I'm feeding, my job is going away. Every document I feed in there goes by. So do you see that? I mean, are people, I mean, to me, there's still, what's great is I don't want to do those documents. I want to do something else. But how do you help people get out of that headspace that they're?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting, because the irony is the more you tell AI about yourself, the more effective it is. But the more you tell it about yourself, the more it can replace you. There's
Yeah.
there's that
Yeah.
back and forth. And I
Yeah.
think ultimately, and again, you see this a lot on AI right now, or on LinkedIn right now. What
Yeah.
ultimately is going to happen is our ability to grow and be innovative and adaptive and creative. That is going to allow us to find the answers. Because
Yeah.
someone right
Yeah.
now who's sitting there,
Right.
they're feeding an insurance policy into the AI. I can't tell them what, I have no idea what's going to say. But what I
Yeah.
do know is if they sit down and say, okay, my goal is to create a business that actually works inside of AI,
Yeah.
that will bring up a fear or doubt. Then they can say, hey, what do my values say to do? Those will give a potential answer to what they need to do to find things out.
Yeah.
Because we have to be, I mean, the fun part is that we get to be creative. We get to you can literally make up anything and be like, okay, you could tell either an app, or hire a vibe coder, then they can have a prototype in
Yeah.
hours, days,
Yeah.
weeks at
Yeah.
the most.
Yeah.
So there's massive amounts of creativity, but with all that opportunity comes doubts and fears. It's
Yep.
like you remember, you're old enough to remember Blockbuster. It's like you
Yep.
go in, there's a million videos, and you're like, I can't choose a single
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And that the overwhelm of choice. So right now, people have massive opportunities,
Yeah.
and given that, plus politics, plus society, plus dating, plus whatever you want to add to it,
Yeah.
it ends up this massive overwhelm of fear, and we get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, it is. I mean, fear is the primary choice of advertising these days. Is you're
Yeah.
not going to do this, or you're not going to be this, or and unfortunately that starts to train our brains to avoiding things as opposed to embracing things. Yeah. So we do talk a lot about habits on the Habit Architect. Go figure. I think this aligns so well. I mean, the habits that stick need to be tied to a value, or they're not going to stick. I mean, New Year's resolutions, the biggest problem on Quitter's Day is that they really didn't care. They just thought, oh, I should become a runner. But it didn't align. So they stopped in 21 days or whatever it is. So, I mean, do you see a lot of that in your work with habits and values aligning?
Yeah, the alignment engine itself is a Charles Duhigg's, the Keystone Habit.
Yeah.
That it's ultimately like, if you do those 6 questions, you're triggering celebration, you're triggering growth, you're triggering awareness, like you're triggering a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And if someone has a habit that they want to implement, that they've got, I want to be a runner, or whatever it is, and they haven't been able to do it, they can actually, instead of trying to do the habit, just make a habit of asking those 6 questions.
Yeah.
And it will always give you the energy, the clarity, the confidence, and the energy to go do whatever it is that you have to do. So and then also the part, and I don't know if we haven't talked about this, and I don't know if you noticed this, when you created the values, I required what's called a spark word. I call a spark word.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a value like fun or creativity or adventure or play, something in that realm.
Yep.
And what that does is, one, that reflects who you were when you were younger, because I don't care how old you were. At some point, fun,
Yeah.
play, adventure was part of who you are. And there's work. I don't know if you're familiar with Barbara Fredrickson. She does work. She does out of positive psychology, and she pointed out that, or her research showed that words like adventure and play and creativity, they expand our awareness. So they give us ideas of, in times of stress. Back in the day, we would get chased by lions and tigers. We need to be focused. But now, when we're in a boardroom or we're dealing with, how do we deal with AI? We got to expand our awareness into the stress. So by including a word like fun, play, creativity in your core values, it brings a sense of fun and play and creativity. Yeah. And James Clear actually went on a podcast, I think it was late last year, and he talked about one of the things that wasn't in Atomic Habits was the sense of enjoyment. Yeah. And if you don't enjoy doing a habit, yes, you're not going to do it. I mean, exactly. You might do it for a little while, but the continuation of it. So by bringing a sense of fun, play, adventure in your values, connecting that with the habit, you're just more likely to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic, Joey. I really appreciate that perspective as well. So we are running out of time. That we close with a question, and you've kind of already answered it. So this may be an unfair question to you, but in the age of AI, and you're thinking about efficiencies and gains and things like that, what is a task that you either handed off or you plan on handing off to AI so you can free up and do other things?
So, right. I haven't gone fully to like agents, like doing all of my, outreach and that sort of thing. And I haven't actually done coaching. There's a lot of coaching programs that say, hey, and my coaching really is just ask these 6 questions. One thing that I have used AI with is actually helping me write a book. So nice. I'm writing a book on this process and honestly how people can use it to make today better than yesterday. That's the theme of the book. And I have really found AI to be helpful as a critique, as someone to like push back, say, hey, here's something that's, working or not. Yeah. And so as a creative partner, AI has been a tool. I haven't gotten to the point yet where I'm like comfortable, having to do all the outreach. I'm guessing that will happen soon. But right now, I really value the ability to get critique, get feedback, and keep pushing myself. Yeah. And I'll be honest, there are times I'm like, good, and that's when I take a deep breath and I'm like, okay, what do my values say to do here? And I'll go through it.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great answer. That's awesome. So tell people how they can find you, how best to interact and work with your programs.
Yeah, you go to certaingrowth.com, and actually there you can go. There's a button there to help you identify values, and it takes about 5 minutes. You can identify your 3 values as well as you get the questions, and it will you can start to use it. I give all of that away for free, and if people want support, because the one thing I will say is that using your values, and you said it's about practice. It just is. It's a muscle that you build. It's nothing. Nobody's inherently has more values than others. And so I have an 8-week program where we build up your muscle so that you walk away not only knowing your values and how to use them, but you just have to practice. You're like, hey, I can do this.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Joey, for spending some time with us today here in front of a holiday weekend. And I think what you're doing is so important, not only in both sides of that equation, either a better tomorrow, but also not beating yourself up for what happened yesterday too much, and learn from it. And we all can use that lesson repeatedly. So appreciate your message and appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, tune in next week for the next version of The Habit Architect. We appreciate it. Go back and listen to other episodes. Listen to this one. Like, comment, share, publish, whatever your favorite podcast channel asks you to do that and help us promote the program. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.